The Telephone and Communication, Nate Lott, ETEC 540. In the realm of communication technologies, one cannot deny the importance of the telephone across history. Connecting humanity across vast distances, oceans and mountains. It allows us to relay information, data, and talk to those we love as if they were right next to us. To understand the profound effect the telephone has had on communication, we must first look at a brief history and how it came to be. The word telephone comes from the Greek word tele, which means from afar, and phone, which is voice. As simple as it might seem, the idea for the telephone is what we passed as a possible communication device as kids, which was basic tin cans and a string. A child's toy, with the idea being the can could collect the sound, and a string or wire can transmit one's voice over a certain distance. Long before the invention of the electromagnetic telephone, there have been numerous ways to transmit speech over extended distances through pipes or other sound-enhancing devices. The man credited with the vast majority of this work was Robert Hooke. I have, by the help of a distended wire, propagated the sound to a very considerable distance in an instant. While he was the first to create the mechanical acoustic telephone, Alexander Graham Bell, the Scottish inventor, is credited with creating the first practical telephone. In 1874, the essential idea of the telephone formed in his mind. As he explained it, if I could make a current of electricity vary in intensity precisely as the air varies in density during the production of sound, I should be able to transmit speech telegraphically. His dedicated research in the area of speech and hearing led to the creation of the U.S. patent on the telephone in 1867. From there, in 1877, the first commercial telephone company was created near Berlin, followed by the first coast-to-coast long-distance telephone call from New York to San Francisco in 1916. The telephone is what can be deemed as a piece of the second orality. Ong speaks on the fact that the telephone has ushered in the age of the second orality. It is a means for socialization rooted in our base oral tradition. What the telephone has done is change the way we build community. It forms the speaker and the listener together in a moment, an auditory space. The spoken word brings the two individuals much more closely together in the moment than a written interaction ever could. The two people are not physically present together, but their voices are in the same place at the same time. With this comes a sense of intimacy and closeness that was not present with written interactions. Of course, the telephone has had a profound effect on the speed and efficiency of communication as well. Writing a letter and the movement of that letter to the recipient was the first form of communication to feel the effects. Now communication could be delivered instantaneously and in real time. Writing a letter would fall to the wayside as a means for people to communicate effectively and quickly, when time was an important factor. The telephone's first use was strictly for business. The first subscribers were usually doctors, druggists, and businessmen, and the phone was not immediately available to private homes. Service was expensive at a time when wages were a few dollars a week. Looking from a business standpoint, determining how a large business would communicate with customers would be forever altered. For example, prices are always fluctuating, and the telephone would give businesses the ability to monitor and react to prices in the market as they changed. Businesses' entire operations did not have to remain in their country, but could now be internationalized as the telephone allowed for them to move their product to new markets and new countries. One of the overlooked societal changes that the telephone ushered in was the creation of women as telephone operators in business and the movement of them into the business realm to handle customer complaints and billing issues. The telephone was effective, though, in freeing women from traditional social limitations. And it was also important in offering them economic opportunity in the growing telephone industry. As well, in Muslim societies where men and women are meant to live in separate zones, it made communication between the sexes easier, creating a social space where they can meet. It also enables women to organize their lives more independently while still taking the societal norms seriously. The telephone, of course, was not immediately available to everyone, as it was an expensive piece of machinery when first introduced. The main communication was for business and political transactions, and the telephone remained, therefore, a tool of the colonial elite. However, as it became more affordable, it started to appear in every home, and families that lived towns, states, provinces, or countries apart could now stay in touch. It improved communication within the family unit, even across vast distances. It allowed families to be in two places at the same time, improving interconnectedness. One can see few greater contributions to the growth of the media than the telephone, where the speed and time that information travels is of the utmost importance. The telephone has been the central player in the growth of mass media. When a groundbreaking story occurs, of course, that information can be immediately relayed to the media via telephone, and the journalists dispatched to the affected area. This in turn increases our access into news information and current events, as we are immediately aware of the news events occurring in real time. This can be taken even further. As a news story breaks, we communicate with one another about the events unfolding. As Innes states, as communication improves, there is a shift in perspective and concern from local and regional units to national and international ones. Media can report on issues that lie far outside our immediate locales, and that information can be communicated back instantly, giving us a more global perspective on events and a broader understanding of the changing world around us. So far, we have looked at the telephone and the conveniences it brings, along with the enhancements it delivers when it comes to speed and efficiency of communication. Yet there remains a flip side to this technology that we have not discussed. As Postman states, every technology is both a burden and a blessing. Not either or, but this and that. There is no give without take, and the advancement of the telephone is no exception to that rule. In Innes's The Bias of Communication, he talks about monopolies of knowledge, in which those that control access to that knowledge hold powerful positions. While the telephone is a device that connects us, it also has cut a wide division between the haves and have-nots in our society. Those that cultivate competence in the use of a new technology become an elite group that are granted undeserved authority and prestige by those who have no such competence. When the telephone was introduced, there is no doubt that only the wealthy could afford such a machine, and this in turn created a divide in those that held the knowledge and power through mere acquisition of the new device. The speed at which information could be relayed and obtained within the advent of the telephone afforded those that could obtain this technology greater power. Innes speaks on this when he states, "The decisive advantage gained by those with an advance warning of events or prices." This is true for the outcome of war, where one could tell where the enemy was approaching from, and the position is instantly communicated, resulting in a higher death toll or casualties. As well, in the business realm, the ability to reach a business contact ahead of your competition through the use of new communication mediums. Or perhaps even more personal is the replacement of writing with a medium that involves much more exposure. To get hung up in a phone call relays a much stronger and immediate message to the recipient than a written conversation. Attached to this is the removal of the body language that we use to communicate so much of what we say to each other. The telephone strips us of that method of communication and replaces it with a purely auditory-based means of expression. Regardless of the pitfalls, it is apparent that the advent of the telephone as a means of communication has a side that is not positive. Through this presentation, we have looked at a brief history of the telephone, how it has changed society and its darker side. There is no denying that the telephone has changed the way we communicate and forever altered the society structure of our world. It has created advancements and caused fear and anxiety. It is not merely a simple communication device, but a driver for social change. Yet is it a form of technology that we cannot live without, as instantaneous voice communication has become a central component of our history and culture.